Every time you say, "I'll do it later," just 5 more minutes, "I'll start tomorrow," it feels harmless, doesn't it? Like a small delay, like nothing important just happened. But what if that exact moment is where your life quietly starts slipping? Because in that moment, you're not just delaying a task, you're negotiating with yourself. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never face. Every negotiation you win against discipline, you lose against your future. So the real question is, how many times have you already lost? And if it's happening every day, what do you think that turns into over a year, over 5 years, over a lifetime? Because this doesn't show up as failure immediately. It shows up as comfort, relief, that feeling of, "I'll do it later." But have you ever noticed how later never really comes, or worse, it comes with guilt attached? So if you're not lazy, if you're not incapable, then why does this keep happening? Why do you keep delaying things you know matter? Because laziness isn't the problem. If it was, you wouldn't be able to function when it matters. You wouldn't show up to work. You wouldn't meet deadlines. You wouldn't handle responsibilities when there are consequences. So clearly, you can act. You can be disciplined. You can push through discomfort, but only when something external forces you to. So what happens when there's no one watching, no deadline, no pressure, no consequences except the ones you set for yourself? That's where everything changes. Because now you're in charge, and that's exactly where most people lose control. Because when you're the one making the rules, you're the one breaking them. And when that happens repeatedly, something dangerous begins to form. A pattern, but not just a behavioral pattern, an identity. But how does that identity actually get built? It starts in moments so small you barely notice them. Your alarm goes off. You had a plan. You were serious last night. This is it. I'm changing. But now it's morning, and a different voice shows up. Just today, sleep more. Your body needs rest. It's not that serious. And in that moment, you pause. Not because you're confused, but because you're negotiating. And here's the part most people miss. The negotiation isn't logical. It's emotional. It's your brain trying to reduce discomfort. And it's incredibly convincing. So you agree. You go back to sleep. And it feels good for a moment. But what did that moment actually cost you? Because the day hasn't even started, and you've already told yourself something important. My decisions don't mean anything. Now multiply that moment again and again and again. At work, you know what you should be doing, but instead you scroll, you delay, you distract yourself. Why? Because starting feels uncomfortable. So again, you negotiate. I'll start in 10 minutes. But what happens after those 10 minutes? Another negotiation, another delay, another small loss. And then the gym. You planned to go. You even told yourself you would. But now you're tired. And here it comes again. I'll go tomorrow. And in that moment, you don't just skip the gym. You reinforce the same pattern, the same identity. So what do all these moments actually do to you? Because they don't feel like failure. They feel like small decisions. But those small decisions are shaping something much bigger. They're shaping how you see yourself. And more importantly, how seriously you take yourself. Because every time you break a promise to yourself, your brain records it, not as a memory, but as evidence. Evidence that your words don't matter. Evidence that your plans aren't real. Evidence that you can't be trusted. And once that belief is built, what do you think happens the next time you try to change? You say, "I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to stay consistent. This time is different." But why would your brain believe you? It has proof that you won't follow through. So even before you start, there's doubt. And that doubt isn't weakness, it's conditioning. So now you're stuck in a cycle. You want to change, but you don't trust yourself enough to believe you will. So you hesitate, you delay, you overthink, and then you negotiate again. But what if the real problem isn't discipline? What if it's not motivation either? What if the real problem is the way you make decisions? Because most people don't make decisions, They react to feelings. If they feel motivated, they act. If they feel tired, they stop. If they feel resistance, they avoid. But what happens when your life is controlled by something that changes every hour? You become inconsistent because emotions are unstable. They're designed for survival, for comfort, not for growth. So if your system depends on emotion, your system is broken. And that's why you feel stuck. Not because you don't know what to do, but because you're waiting to feel like doing it. And that feeling comes and goes. So what happens when you stop waiting? What happens when you stop negotiating? There's a moment where everything changes, and it's not dramatic. There's no motivation, no excitement, just a decision, a quiet one, where you stop asking yourself, do I feel like this? And start telling yourself, this is what I do. But why is that so powerful? Because you remove the question, and the question is the problem. Should I wake up? Should I work? Should I go to the gym? Every question opens the door to negotiation, and every negotiation weakens you. So what happens when the question disappears? You don't think, you act, and that changes everything. Because now you're not relying on emotion, you're relying on structure, and structure doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't adjust itself for your comfort. It simply exists, and you follow it. But what does that actually look like in real life? Your alarm rings. You get up. No debate, no delay, no just 5 more minutes, just action. You sit down to work. You start immediately. No scrolling, no warm-up, no distractions. You go to the gym. You train. You follow through. Not because you feel motivated, but because that's the rule. And something strange starts to happen. Things get easier. Not because the work changed, but because the resistance disappeared. And why did the resistance disappear? Because resistance lives in the negotiation, not in the action. Once you act, there's no resistance, only momentum. But if it's that simple, why doesn't everyone do it? Because at the beginning, it feels uncomfortable, even restrictive. Why? Because your brain is addicted to options. It's addicted to escape routes, to flexibility, to comfort. So when you remove those options, it feels like pressure, like you're forcing yourself, like you're losing freedom. But what if that's not true? What if the opposite is true? What if the options were the thing keeping you stuck? Because every option gives you a way out. Every maybe later gives you an escape. And every escape keeps you exactly where you are. So what happens when there's no escape? You move forward, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't feel like it. And that's where real change begins. But here's where it goes deeper. Because this isn't just about habits, it's about identity. Because the moment you stop negotiating, you stop being someone who tries and become someone who does. Someone whose words have weight. Someone who follows through. Someone who doesn't need motivation. And that identity changes everything. Because now your actions are predictable. Your habits are stable. Your confidence starts to grow. Not because you're winning, but because you're consistent. Because you finally trust yourself. And that trust is the foundation of everything. But what happens if you never build it? What happens if you keep negotiating forever? You keep delaying, keep adjusting your standards, keep choosing comfort in small moments. And over time, those small moments become your life. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, almost invisible way. You look back one day and realize nothing really changed. You stayed in the same place. Not because you couldn't move, but because you never stopped negotiating. And that's the hardest truth to accept, because it means it was always in your control. So now the real question isn't what should you do? You already know that. The real question is, are you finally going to decide? Because the next moment is coming, the next alarm, the next task, the next opportunity to delay. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. Not a big one, not a life-changing one, a small one. But those are the ones that matter, because they repeat every day. So when that moment comes, and your mind says later, not today, just this once, understand what's actually happening. That's not you thinking. That's you negotiating. And the outcome of that negotiation is shaping your life. So decide carefully, because one version of you is always winning, and one version is always losing. The only question is, which one are you feeding? If this hit harder than you expected, like the video. Comment the one area where you keep negotiating with yourself. Share this with someone who keeps saying, "I'll start tomorrow." And subscribe if you're ready to become someone whose words actually mean something.